Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, Ministries Making a Difference. I'm Shara Goswick, your host, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today on the podcast, I talked to Steve Ward, founder of Steps Ministries. Steps Ministries is doing incredible things for free online for people all over the world, and they are helping people improve their lives, grow closer to God, and prevent behavioral issues. Our word of the week this week
It's the word of the week.
is pause. Steve talks about 3 steps he asks people to take before they jump into something they shouldn't or make a choice that they might later regret. And the first step is to pause. He just tells them to pause, to stop and pause. And I think all of us can learn from that. I definitely need to learn to pause. I tend to be very hasty. I get in a hurry. And if I'm not paying attention, I will make a choice that I will regret. Pausing is good. Let's stop and let's look around and make sure we're doing the right thing. Let's make sure we have the right motives. Let's make sure this is something I'm not going to regret doing later. Is it necessary? Is it fruitful? Is it helpful? I love that is the first step. I think that's something we can all learn from. I loved listening to Steve's story and learning about how and why he started this ministry, and I think it could be beneficial to people all over. They get involved with businesses and schools that want to use their resources, and I think this is a great one. I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Nice Christmas decorations there.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody has commented on it that I've talked to. I just got these bookshelves in behind me. So normally I have my big tree in here and I didn't want to cover them up. So I put the little skinny one in here, but I love it.
Yeah, it's nice.
So why'd you get started? Why did you ever start Steps?
So the big reason was, I would say, because of the troubles my family went through, but that really led me toward an epiphany that I could tell you the story about. In other words,
Sure.
in my immediate family, which is me, my wife, and 2 sons, we kind of beat the odds in terms of the normal ratio for substance abuse in the United States is about 1 out of 7 or something like that.
Wow.
But you take substance abuse and mental health and you add it all up and you say, well, how big is the normal family? And it's about 50% of families have someone in the immediate family who's struggling. But anyway, in our family, that wasn't the ratio. It was 3 out of 4.
Wow.
So including myself and my wife and older son,
Yeah.
and now I was what you might label a high functioning alcoholic. In fact, we just put out material on high functioning alcoholism because there are millions of people who are addicted to something, or in spiritual terms, they have an idol to something, and they don't even recognize it. They don't know what they don't know, But in the world of recovery, I found out, well, I'll be darned. Some of the world's worst problems, such as substance abuse and mental health and related compulsive issues, are very treatable. I mean, tens of millions of people get better from them. And one of the best way to treat it, if you've ever known anyone who comes through recovery, is you learn how to live life better, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, personally, socially. And if you live life better, then you're going to have less odds that you either need to choose to numb or escape or make something feel better or change your mood or things like that. So, so I thought, okay, a lot of the world's worst problems are very potentially treatable. Tens of millions of people have gotten better. The way to avoid them in the first place is to live life better. And in many cases, you can prevent some of those issues from becoming life-changing. But then for me personally, right, my recovery program of choice was called Celebrate Recovery. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a Christian 12-step program.
Yeah.
The 12 steps were invented by AA, right, by Alcoholics Anonymous. But they were invented and written and captured and codified by very strong Christians. So they put the 12 steps up there, and I said, I'll be darned, those things look a lot like the Bible to me, which in effect they are. They're very, very biblical. So in effect, the first book I wrote was this one, which tries to take the 12 steps and simplify them and bring them to the rest of the world. It's not really about recovery or addiction. It's about living life better. And so I'm in recovery for myself and as a husband and as a dad. And I see this and I go, why don't we teach this stuff to everybody, right? Why don't parents convey practical life skills to their kids so that they can live life better emotionally, spiritually, socially, personally, mentally. Why don't we teach this in middle school and high school? Well, why don't companies include this in their wellness or benefits program? And I started looking around for stuff like that and didn't really find it. So, by the way, I was in that business world for 38 years. I was with IBM for 38 years, and so I'm still working full time, right? And so that led me to start writing a book, and I got so fascinated by how do we capture and distill the world's wisdom out there, meaning wisdom that comes from the Bible, recovery,
Right.
wellness, psychology, neuroscience, personal development, and how do we make it very easy to understand and to put into practice? Because most people, whether they have issues or not, they're not doing that. They're,
Right.
90% of the people who have serious problems with behavioral health issues don't get help. And you take that the rest of the world, right? I mean, the
Wow.
normal person out there in the world, right? They don't know what they don't know. They're just running through life and they're focusing on, do I making enough money? Do people think I'm doing a good job, my work? So therefore, do they see me that way? And do I have any major problems in my family? And if
Right.
the answer to those three things are okay, they think they're all good. And they don't know it, but as Thoreau would say, right? They're living a life of quiet desperation, right? They
Yeah.
they have anxiety. They don't have a sense of purpose. They have few deep relationships, certainly for men, right? And they aren't vulnerable or open with anyone. They're not very self-aware.
Yeah.
They have issues that are issues that they don't even label them as such. It could be control or perfectionism or anger or codependency or people pleasing. And that's what they think their life is.
Yeah.
But I think God wants it to be a lot more than that, you know?
Absolutely.
So, so I wrote the book and then I started blogging and I enjoyed that process. So
Mhm.
I just felt led that I was supposed to go do it full time.
Yeah.
And so I plotted my exit strategy, I guess, and 6.5 years ago, I left and founded Steps Ministries. And as far as
Wow.
I know, I'll be doing it as long as I'm functional. So,
That's awesome.
yeah,
So
it's fun.
how I saw on your website you talked about how y'all use practical steps to help people in all the ways that you were talking about. What are some practical things that you do to help people who are trying to get out of that lifestyle?
Um, I'll give you one extreme because it's on my mind because I was working on it this morning, right? Is to date, the people we've tended to serve have tended to be middle class and above families just because that's where our message is, it fits, you know. But that said, the principles apply to anyone. And I knew even before I started Steps that there's a part of me that has calling for inner city kind of urban neighborhoods. And
Mm-hmm.
there's another story behind that that I'll say for another day. But I thought that's a really hard environment to go into, right? In other words, um, it's hard for you know an elderly, not elderly, an older Caucasian guy to come swooping in to an inner city neighborhood and say, "I'm here
Yeah.
to," that happens all the time, and it never works,
Right.
right? So I wanted to be invited in and
Mm-hmm.
invited into a situation where there was another organization like a nonprofit who was in that area, in that neighborhood. So that came to be about a year ago. So we're now working on education that we will start rolling out actually in January, in a month,
Oh wow.
to to underserved, disadvantaged teenagers. I mean,
Wow.
they're 15, 16, 17-year-old kids who live in a neighborhood that if they have one parent, they're lucky.
Yeah.
If they do have a parent, the odds of them or someone in the family having a drug problem are significant. They all know people who've overdosed and been murdered. They go to failing high school that where the teachers and the administration, I don't want to say they don't care because I think they
Yeah.
do care. They're just beleaguered,
Right.
so they pass these kids from grade to grade, and frankly, they're just trying to avoid major catastrophes every day at school.
Yeah.
So mentally, they don't know how to learn and comprehend. They don't know how to make good choices. They don't know how to form good habits. Emotionally, they're not very self aware. They're broken inside, but they don't think it's okay for them to accept it. So,
Yeah.
therefore, they don't do anything about it. Socially, they're all putting on an act, right? They're trying to act like they're the toughest, coolest, funniest, or most reserved
Right.
person in the room, and they're putting on an act rather than knowing how to communicate and form relationships. Spiritually, most of them know God exists, but don't think about him very much, and their exposure to God was maybe they got dragged to church a few times, but they saw someone who seemed to be yelling at them or preaching at them and telling them what they had done wrong, and who also seemed to be a hypocrite, right? So therefore, they've set that aside.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to teach 18 classes, and over those classes, we're going to go through 3 lessons on spirituality, like who is God and who is He really, and what are your values in life? And by the way, do you know that God has given you meaning and value and identity, right? You are important. And then do the same thing emotionally and mentally. It's like this morning I was working on. Oh, sorry, long way to get to your answer. I was working on one on helping them make better choices and decisions.
Yeah.
And we use the concept, it's called managing your mind. And if you study, this is not an exaggeration, what I'm going to say, like if you study neuroscience or psychology or wellness or the Bible or recovery, personal development, about how to like manage negative thoughts or form habits or deal with anxiety, you come up with some very, very, very similar approaches. But out there in the world, they all look different. They use different
Yeah.
words, So we simplified all that neuroscience 3 steps: pause, evaluate, choose.
Mm.
Pause, interrupt the situation, right? You don't react. You pause. You step back from the situation emotionally, because otherwise, people, especially these kids, right? You tend to react emotionally or impulsively or compulsively. When you pause, you give yourself some breathing space, and you intentionally don't react. Then you evaluate. I mean, neuroscience says that when you engage your brain, your mental brain, so evaluate is simple, right? I mean, we're talking to inner city 16-year-old. So evaluate just means, hey, what options could you do here?
Right.
Think of 2 or 3 options you could do. What do you think are the pros and cons of those options? You know,
Yeah.
just by doing that, you're now kind of balancing the emotional compulsive component of it. And you're also logically, that's decision making skills, right?
Yeah.
And then you choose. And you don't try to choose something that you don't try to fix the whole problem right now. You try to choose the next right step. What is one simple thing I can do that's within the things I can control that will move the situation into a positive direction?
Yeah.
Right. So that was the lesson I was working on this morning. But that said, these principles apply to everybody. So if
Yeah.
we're talking, if we're talking to middle-aged business people, we would convey it in a slightly more elegant way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking to, you know, moms and dads, and we do a lot with parents.
Yeah.
So in that game, we aim it at parenting scenarios and all that. But now this year, we're reaching out to teenagers, including underserved inner city teenagers. So, but
Yeah.
that was an example of taking a lot of science and wisdom, even biblical, and
Sure.
distilling it down to pause, evaluate, choose.
Yeah. That's great for anybody to do.
Yeah, yeah,
And we all, well, I do. I'm always in a hurry. And that's something that is always a struggle for me. It's just to slow down and stop. I don't
yeah,
have to be in a hurry for anything. And that's just how I've been that way for a
yeah,
long time. But so that's something that I continually work on. So that's
yeah,
a great way. That's a
yeah,
great way to look at it. And I was going to ask if you worked with teenagers or young
yeah,
people. So it is so important. And it's sad that we live in a world that that's even a problem.
yeah,
But it is.
yeah,
That's the
yeah. I
reality of
mean, these kids are extreme. There's nobody speaking into their lives.
it. Yeah.
Nobody. You, like I said, let's give the school the benefit of the doubt and say they have a neutral component where they're presented with boring information that seems irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
They're not going to church. There are no positive role models around. You
Right.
know, on their day to day, in their day to day lives, the only people they see who seem to be succeeding are
Mhm.
drug dealers.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and they don't know how to. The lesson prior to this one is learning how to learn. How do you
Right.
learn? They don't know how to learn. And again, I'm not talking complicated.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, how do you pay attention and look for the key points and jot a couple of notes and rehearse it later. They don't know how to do that.
You
Nobody's
know,
talking to them about that.
from my experience, I can and I know this is true for those kids, but I think about how when I had one person that believed in me, and I'm thankful I have a family that loves me, and but somebody that was successful, somebody that was doing something good would believe in me. Man, that changed the way I did so many things. So
Yeah,
I know those kids, that's helping
yeah,
them to know that
yeah,
somebody believes in them and is, thinks they're important, and that's so powerful.
yeah.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, and I've never understood this. I know it happens all the time, but you talked about being a functional alcoholic.
Mhm.
How does that happen? I know how it happens. How do people function that way? That's what I have a hard time understanding.
Well, look for me, right? I wasn't. So I grew up in a nice family, right? There was no trauma growing up. Um, I was valedictorian in my high school,
Wow.
right? And so school, I never had to even think about school,
Right.
but because that wasn't important to me, right? When I was 15 or 16, now again, I wasn't self-aware enough at the time to know, but what I wanted was to be calmer because I have a very active, it wasn't anxiety. It was just, I wanted to be more calmer and relaxed. I
Mhm.
wanted to be connected, especially to people who acted like they were the cool crowd.
Right.
And so I wanted to be connected and calmer and like that. And guess what? There's something that helped me do that.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, that's okay. So in high school, it was like a social habit.
Yeah.
Went to Georgia Tech, got an engineering degree. School still wasn't a problem. And so now I'm away on my own.
Yeah.
So there were no boundaries on me. And it's probably somewhere in that stage, where it became an addiction for me. In
Yeah.
other words, where I depended on it to help me feel a certain way. And then I start work and you know, I'm a relatively responsible person, even though I was an alcoholic, right? So, uh, you know, I would, I work real hard. Yeah, I even work relatively long hours, but yet in parts of my life, I depended on alcohol to solve my problems for me,
Yeah.
but, um, I didn't wind up with a deep bottom, right? I didn't get fired or get divorced or get a DUI or, I just, I actually found God or Jesus found me when I was like 40,
Yeah.
and I still kind of in denial compartmentalized it for a little while. But I just started thinking, hey, spiritually, this is an idol in my life,
Yeah.
and so here, acting like that God is head of my life, but yet there's an area that I'm setting aside. Now, it's possible that some number of people may have had slight suspicions, but I'll say this point to kind of make your point. I think the odds are high that almost nobody other than my wife
Right.
would have
Would have
associated
known.
me having, quote, an addiction,
Yeah.
right? But an addiction is a compulsive habit you do over and over again that has negative consequences, and you find it very hard to stop. Well,
Mm.
guess what? We're all addicted to something, you know.
Right. Right.
So it was really for the big reasons that got to me.
Mhm.
Like, I don't think this is the way I'm supposed to live life at 2/3 speed,
Yeah.
and um, you know, maybe I'm a good dad and a good husband, but am I as good as I could be?
Right.
You know, and then when you get to the question of is this how God wants me to live my life? Well, pretty dicey ground there.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So let's say that someone has a problem and they're looking for help. They're looking for something. What happens when they find your program? What are the first steps that they go through?
yeah. I'll give you the easy mechanical way. Right.
Okay.
If they go to our website, lifeimprovedsteps.com, and I'll talk, for example, in this area, right? They will quickly see, okay, here's a set of information on behavioral health, right? So if they click on behavioral health, they would see an online toolkit for dealing with emotional well-being and improving your mental health.
Okay.
Okay, am I interested in that? Or they would see one on understanding recovery and addiction in general.
Yeah.
They would see the one I just mentioned, we just announced, called Understanding High Functioning addiction. You know, and they would say, okay, one of those. And they would click on that. And then you go to what we call an online toolkit. It's
Mm-hmm.
meant to be a very easy to consume set of content. It's actually a short to medium course, but
Okay.
it's all on one page. It's, you know, you can see the flow of the chapters all on you. There are 1 minute videos, so you can, hey, on this chapter, here are the key points. Here's why it's important. Okay, I want to go deeper here. I'm going to go read this section for 5 or 6 minutes. They're going to summarize the key points for me. They ask me some questions to think about. You know, so we make it very, very easy to consume.
Yeah.
But if they go through just one of those, it might take them maybe an hour.
Yeah.
They've got a pretty robust understanding of that topic, and
Yeah.
and they will be. And you know, a lot of stuff out there in this world is just trying to teach people some of the why and a lot of the what. Like, what are the terms, and
Right.
you know, which is all well and good, right?
Yeah.
We can't connect with the why and the what, but we also focus on the how. Okay, now,
Yeah.
well, what should I go do?
Yeah.
You know, what should I do about it? You know,
Yeah.
so or if they go to the website, they can see a page for proactive parenting, and
Mm-hmm.
they go there, they go, okay, well, here's some education on biblical parenting. Here's some on parenting teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Here's parenting in a crisis. Here's parenting children. Here's grandparenting, you know? And so with about 2 clicks, they can find themselves in a set of content. It's, again, easy to use, but yet if they choose to stay engaged,
Sure.
relatively robust, you know?
That's
So
awesome. So
that's
do you how can people support your ministry? People that maybe don't need help, but they want to support what you're doing, they believe in what you're doing. How can they help you?
well, we're 501(c)(3) nonprofit, so obviously
Okay.
donating helps,
Sure.
right? I mean, we survive based on grants and individual donors.
Yeah.
Um, if there are organizations that we could help or that we could partner with to connect us to them,
Okay.
is good. It could be a church or a company or another nonprofit.
Yeah.
See, we now have it set up so that we can share content with an organization very efficiently, right?
Good.
We'll go to a church or a nonprofit or a company, and we can build them a web page that is customized to them, right? So it has their
Yeah.
logo on it. Let's say it's oriented on families or on mental health or on
Right.
living life better. They pick what education they want to have access to. And so we
Mm.
put big icons on there, you know, and so, you know, did one recently for a business organization, right? So we just put on there dealing with anxiety, having better relationships, and living intentionally, right?
Yeah.
So if we can provide one page to an organization, and all they have to do is promote it to their audience or employees or congregation, and it can stay there for years. I mean, our content is somewhat timeless.
Yeah.
In other words, we're not writing about, you know, the latest drug that you find in the convenience store, right?
Right.
We're writing on what's the behavior that leads people to do that, and how can they
Yeah.
prevent it. And so a lot of our content will be as valid in a decade or 20 years as it is
That's
now.
great. That is
Yeah,
great.
it's
It
all cool.
is, something I haven't thought about. I spoke with a woman last year who does a drug prevention program for kids, and it's hands-on and it's very, she's in Pennsylvania. It's a great, incredible program. And it was not something I had thought about preventing even that young. I think they allow kids as young as 10 to go through the program. And it's not like your program. It's like a day kind of 1 day kind of thing. But it's very powerful to provide help for people even before they get to a point where, like, you talked about on your website, it's detrimental and it can be very dangerous getting to a certain point in your addiction. And so I love what you're doing. I think this is really great, especially for businesses. That's awesome to
Yeah,
give access to their employees and it's a safe place. If they find it online, they can read all this
yeah,
stuff. It's a safe place to do it. So
yeah.
I
It's
think it's
anonymous.
wonderful.
It's
Yeah.
convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Do you have a moment during all of this that just really stood out to you? Like, just you were so thankful you got to participate in, or probably have several moments.
The real answer is I have several moments every day on that. That's not
Wow.
it's not exaggeration.
That's
I
awesome.
I and what I do is it's hard in a way,
Yeah.
right? Because you're dealing with a lot of people who have a lot going on in their life.
Sure.
So it's emotionally draining at times when if I'm interacting with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like where I'm supposed to be. You know, as far as I can tell, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about being thankful.
Yeah.
Man, I'm reminded every single day of how thankful I am. You
That's
know,
wonderful.
I'm thankful for what our family went through. And I mean that
Yeah.
deeply and genuinely. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, God is very, very creative on using our trials and tribulations to do his very best work,
Yeah.
you know. So
I can attest to that.
yeah,
For
yeah,
sure. Well, is there
yeah.
anything I haven't asked you about? I love this program and I'm excited to share with people. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to tell me?
Uh the one thing I normally try to find a way to say
Okay.
is because I know whoever watches your podcast, that a lot of those people hurting in some way and they're not talking to anybody about it.
Yeah,
Or somebody close to them is.
sure.
But so if they know nothing else, they need to know that everybody's got stuff going on,
Yeah.
right? We all have issues that you could put into the genre of mental health. We're all addicted to something. There are things that we do compulsively over and over again that have
Right.
negative consequences that we find out. We all do. So you're not alone. You may think you're broken, but no, you just have something you need to deal with. So, you know, it is okay not to be okay, but you don't have to stay that way.
Exactly.
And millions of people have been right where you are, and a lot of them have got through.
Yeah.
But the key is, you know, to become more aware and willing to take steps in the right direction. And the
Sure.
good news is, if you're willing to ask him, God will be there with you every step of the way. You know, you whatever's bothering you, you actually really can get through it.
Yeah.
There is hope. You know, so
Yeah. That's wonderful. I love that. And it's so true. Everything you said
yeah,
is so true. Well,
yeah.
when I share our episode, I will make sure and have your website listed everywhere that I share it so that people know where to find you and find your program. And I thank you for talking to me today. This has been wonderful. I have
My
loved learning
pleasure.
about it.
I've enjoyed it.
Well,
I wish the
good.
best to all the people that you're reaching and serving. You're doing a great service to them. So
Well, thank you. I like you. I know what I'm doing, what I'm supposed to be doing, and I love it. I'm just so
yeah,
thankful to be able to do this. So thank you so
well, good.
much. And I will be in
That's it.
touch soon.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.